Hey guys, what is up? My name is Megan. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Today we are here to combine two video ideas which I really like and make them into one. It is also the start of a new series on my channel. So basically we're combining the idea of discussing underhyped books. So books that I don't see a lot of booktubers, bookstagrammers, or anyone really talk about. And the idea of talking about books that I really love that I don't mention enough on my channel. I feel like we always get into this rut where we always talk about the same books, and unfortunately that means less exposure for other equally amazing books but that aren't as popular. So we're going to rectify that today. We are starting with YA contemporaries because I feel like it's the genre that I've read the most of in my whole life. So that's what's happening. And without further ado, let's hop on in. Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you want to see more in this series. The first book I have to talk about is one that I feel like I haven't ever seen anyone else talk about on BookTube. It came out a few years ago, but it's still amazing, and that is The End of Our Story by Meg Hatson. This author is more known for other books that they have published, but I specifically want to talk about this one. I stumbled upon this at a thrift store one time, and it kind of seemed up my alley, and it turned out to be one of my favorite books of the year, which I read it, which has been a few years now. But this follows a main character named Bridget, and when she was younger, Bridget actually moved to Florida and became really good friends with this boy named Will. They had a blossoming friendship for years and ended up dating and going out together until some betrayal happened, which I'm not going to spoil, and then their friendship was kind of over. However, in this book there is a family loss, so trigger warning for that, but this event specifically brings them back together because obviously both of them were very close to the person that one of them lost, and so it kind of rekindles their connection, not necessarily their friendship, but it's them kind of working out what they used to have, how things ended, and taking a step forward. And also dealing with the fact that they haven't been just like talking or just hearing about each other or getting any news about each other for years. And I just think the writing in this is fantastic. The elements of grief were really well tackled, and the friendship was very believable. This wasn't instantly like two characters who were apart for such a long time but came back together and it took like 2 seconds for them to rekindle. I think every element of this book was really well done. The pacing was fantastic. Everything was realistic. You could feel for the characters. There's a lot of important discussions in here as well, and I just think it's something that's really worth reading if you like a little bit more hard-hitting contemporaries. I highly recommend this one, and I feel like no one has talked about it. It's a really good one. Then we will move on to probably my favorite underrated author, which if you have been following my channel, thank you so much. You probably heard me talk about this a few times already, but I have been gaining a lot more subscribers, and I wanted to mention it again because I feel like, again, not enough people are talking about this. I think I'm the only one I've ever seen read this book, except on Goodreads, and you guys are missing out. So this author is McCall Hoyle. She has published 2 books, the first one being Nothing with Feathers and the second being Meet the Sky. This one published a few years ago. This one I think was like a 2018 release. Both of them, in my opinion, are incredible. Let's start with The Thing with Feathers. This is a YA contemporary that follows a main character named Emily, and she is actually a main character who represents a chronic illness. Emily has epilepsy, and it is what kind of moves the plot along. It is not what makes our character, but it is a lot of why this book even starts. So basically our main character always used to be homeschooled, and it's just her and her mother. Her father actually passed away a few years ago, and since then it's just been her and her mom, and she's been homeschooled. She doesn't go out much. Her epilepsy had been under control, and then she had a bigger seizure, and since then they have obviously been afraid because it's something that is very impactful in someone's life. But she's been doing well for a long time, and so her mother and her doctor both think it's time for Emily to actually go to a real high school and not just be homeschooled, because it's obviously better for social development if you do attend a real school most of the time. And so it's Emily dealing with the fact that she needs to go to school when she doesn't want to. It's her being afraid of having a seizure in front of everyone, not wanting to make friends so that her mom will take her out of school, and then dealing with just the whole high school experience, dealing with having a chronic illness and not wanting to share that information with people, but kind of having to. We also have the most wonderful side character in here, which is a dog. Emily obviously has a dog for her chronic illness because he can kind of detect the signs that a seizure will come along, and so he can prepare to intervene or trying to warn our main character. I loved the dynamic between the main character and her dog and how realistic it was and how they kind of both depend on each other. I think that part of the book was wholesome. This is also kind of a romance because our main character meets this boy who's pretty popular and they end up being friends. He wants to try to be something more with her, but she never told him about the illness, and so there's all that dynamic. They meet in English class, and a lot of the book has also to do with Emily Dickens. Each chapter starts with poetry from Emily Dickens, and one of Emily's projects is also about the author, so it's a great combination of lots of things: literature, romance, just a different experience that I think more people should read about. And then by the same author, we also have Meet the Sky. Meet the Sky follows a main character who is named Sophie, and Sophie also has had a loss in her family, and ever since then she's kind of had a one-track mind where she just wants to focus on her mother and her sister, get great high school grades in order to be able to become a vet, because she has like horses, I believe, in this story, and it's all she wants. She doesn't want anybody bothering her, anyone messing up her plans. But in this book, I won't explain everything that happens, but there ends up being a hurricane and she is stuck with one boy who she kind of hates because they are polar opposites. She seems to describe our main love interest as someone who's kind of careless, who's the type of guy to like surf in a hurricane and he doesn't see the repercussions, and it really annoys our main character because of everything she's been through. But then they get stuck together, so it's like forced proximity in the hurricane, and they try to survive together, and she understands him better, and it's kind of this discussion that people are not always as they seem. Everybody has baggage. But what I really loved about this is also the natural element of like the natural disaster element in here. I haven't seen it much in YA books, and it is something that happens. I just think the writing in both of these books are fantastic. The character development, the kind of romances that are in there, and also the finding yourself and self-growth, everything in here was fantastic. Then we shall talk about my favorite book of 2019. Every book that I do have a specific review for, I'll also link in the cards and description. This one is one of them, and that is Small Town Hearts by Lily Vale. First of all, I just want to say I've talked with the author a few times in tweets on Twitter, and I love her to death. She's coming out with more books in 2021 and 2022, and I could not be more excited. This kind of did make the rounds on BookTube, but I only saw like a few booktubers talk about it, and it was like anticipated reads or just like books they heard about. I haven't seen anyone review or talk about this book, so here I am. I read this in a time in my life where I think I really needed this book. I read this book in 2019 when my life kind of began to be in shambles, and what I didn't know is it would be in shambles for the next year and so. Basically, this book follows a main character named Babe, which is short for Barbara, and she lives in this coastal town in Maine. She loves it there. She is a barista at a coffee shop, and she's finishing up high school. Both her best friends are actually going off and moving from their little town to go to school, and Babe is kind of being left behind. This is a story of a summer where she breaks up with her ex-girlfriend, and her ex-girlfriend kind of comes back in the picture, so it's her coping with the loss of that relationship, as well as entering a friendship, maybe relationship with a boy as well. Our main character is bisexual, and it's a lot about coming to terms with the fact that you don't always know what is happening in your life, and things move very fast, and sometimes you don't want things to go away, and some people don't do well with change, me being the first one. And I think that the elements explored in this is something I've never seen done in YA. not that way anyways, and I was like, what, 22 at the time, connecting with like a 16-year-old, and I bawled my eyes out when I read this book, just because I think everyone can connect, or at least think of a time where they kind of felt the exact same way. This was putting into words a lot of what I could not say at the time. I ended up not having the possibility to go to school for an entire year when I thought I had this whole like plan ahead of me, and our main character doesn't know what she wants to do with her life, and it's kind of like the rejection and the hurt of people moving on, and you feel they're moving on without you. The exploration of feelings in this book was just fabulous. I love small town romances, so this was a win as well, and the coastal town and the descriptions were just fabulous. Go check out my full review, and please do support this author. I think she is fantastic and she has great values as well, so yes. Then we have another debut author, which I've read the book at the same time in my life, the same trip actually. I have a full vlog where I went to Mexico and read a bunch of books, but this book is Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno. Again, this book did make its rounds on BookTube, but if I'm being honest, I think this is published by Disney Hyperion, yes. And so I feel like everybody had a paid promotion to talk about this book, but then no one reviewed it. We're not going to get into that, but I'm going to review, like, kind of review or tell you why you should read it. This follows a main character, obviously, named Rosa Santos, whose whole family has been said to be cursed, and the females in this family cannot date men who own boats because they go missing or they pass away, and it's just the whole shebang. So that element takes form when Rosa meets this boy, and she kind of has a connection with him, but he has a boat, so it's her not wanting to date him because he has a boat and she doesn't want anything to happen to him, and that's just one element. But there are also, similarly to Small Town Hearts, elements of being at an age where you need to make decisions. Our main character has family who is Cuban, but she also has family who lives in Florida. No one wants to talk about their Cuban heritage, but our main character kind of feels like she wants to understand her heritage because she is also Cuban, so it's her being mixed in these two different cultures and not being able to identify as one or the other, and always feeling like she's rejected from wherever she is. She's not fully Cuban, but she's not fully American either, and it's her trying to grapple how she's supposed to feel. She wants to learn more about Cuba, but it's like this taboo thing, and she also has the opportunity to decide where she wants to go to college, and so she's trying to decide if she wants to go study abroad, I believe, or stay in the States. It's just a whole mix of trying to figure yourself out. There's also romance. I loved the description of the town and the friendships and the familial relationships because they're not always easy, and that's how life is, and just finding yourself. This book was absolutely phenomenal, and I think it was talked about, but it kind of slipped under the radar at the same time. So if you haven't picked it up, I highly recommend. Then we have a book I could not shut up about, I believe in 2018, and that is The Geography of Lost Things by Jessica Brody. Again, I think I've seen like 3 people on everyone on BookTube I follow. No one talks about this book, and I feel like it's a definite miss because it's amazing. This book follows a main character named Allie, who her entire life it's kind of been her and her mother. Not because her father passed away, but by choice. Her dad actually was not very present. He left all the time. He's not the best father figure there is on earth. And the story really begins when Allie's father actually passes away, and he gives her this car, which was his like only prized possession. He cared more about that car than anyone else. Allie's family is having financial difficulties, and I think their house is being foreclosed, and so Allie wants to go and find someone to sell this car to because she thinks it's very valuable, and try to stop foreclosure of their home. The only problem is that car is manual, it is a stick shift, and Allie cannot drive stick shift. So with a turn of events and everything, it doesn't like happen with a snap of a finger. What ends up happening is Allie's ex-boyfriend Nick actually ends up driving her, and they go on this road trip together. Obviously there is tension and anger because they're not together anymore, and so it's them kind of unpacking their relationship and what happened, plus Allie unpacking her feelings about her father not being present and passing away and the legacy of the car. as well as a really fun element where I think a lot of you guys will be familiar with the concept that people say that you could start with a pen and end with a house if you keep trading. There is that element in this book where main characters keep trading items, and there's a lot of valuable lessons to be had. I loved the main boy character in here. He doesn't have a perspective, but just the way he would respond to our main character and the thought process he had and the valuable input he had in this book was fabulous. He is soft, he is precious, he had troubles of his own, and it was great to discover and learn more about him along the way. I think that the relationship our main characters build together, it's kind of like a second chance romance. I think that the impact is great, and the pacing is also very realistic. I love road trip books, so this was definitely up my alley. If you love road trip books, pick this one up. Speaking of road trip books, I have like 2 other road trip theme books to talk about. The first one is Let's Get Lost by Eddie Alsad. If you guys don't know, he's one of my favorite authors and he's definitely underrated. I believe he is Mexican or of Latino heritage. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure he's Mexican, and I just love this book so much. This is a kind of book I read years ago when I didn't have a booktube and I just picked up books randomly. My sister had pointed this one out for me and I was like, oh, it sounds great, and I ended up devouring it, and ever since I have loved his writing. You can clearly see this book has aged and it has gone with me pretty much everywhere. I hold a lot of sentimental value to this book. And I know it's old, but it's still good, and I still think it should be read, and not a lot of people on BookTube have probably talked or heard about this, so I'm telling you to read it. This follows one main character named Leia, and she is struggling with a lot of her things in her life, and so she goes and she decides to take a road trip to see the Northern Lights. Along the way, she meets 4 different characters, and she spends a few days with each of them along the way of her road trip, and she learns lessons within each of them, and they learn things from her too. We meet Hudson, who is a small town mechanic, and we have Bree, who is a runaway. We also follow Elliot, who is kind of like a big believer in happily ever afters, but is still searching for his own. And we also have another main character whose name I'm blanking on, but who's lost their boyfriend. And it's basically her having this time with each character. She develops kind of a small romance with one of them, and then it's just her discussing and learning about herself on her journey, but also impacting the life of other people. And so it's kind of her going along her way and how crossing paths with different people can change your life. I think this is a very unique take on a road trip because everybody kind of learns about themselves with the short encounters they have. I just loved the traveling element in here. The writing style is fantastic, and it was really fun to see how the people you will come across in your life have such different life stories, and I feel like it was really well represented in here. Really underhyped. Go check it out, or any of his other books. And the last road trippy book I have to talk about, this video is going to be so long, I'm so sorry, is A Heart in the Body and the World by Deb Colati. This is a book I read at the beginning of this year, I think. Man, the year is so confusing. Pre-COVID, I read this, I think. And I fell in love, cried so hard. This I've seen a little bit more on BookTube, but it's not getting the recognition I think it deserves, and so I'm throwing it in your face again. This follows a main character named Annabelle, who has gone through a lot of traumatic things, which we are not familiar with at the beginning of the book. We just know she's not doing too well emotionally. One day she goes on a run and just keeps running and doesn't stop. Quite literally, until her mom's like, where are you? What are you doing? Elements unfold, and our main character ends up running from Washington to Seattle, and her grandfather actually follows her with an RV. Our main character is kind of running as a coping mechanism for all the trauma that has happened to her. I believe she's also raising money for a cause, and her movement kind of becomes like it gains a lot of traction on the internet, and so her friends get involved and it just becomes this big thing. She runs, I believe it's like 16 miles a day, and it's just, we're in her head the entire time she runs. I've never seen a book written like this. It's written like normally, it's not like in verse or anything, but it's just so fascinating to be able to be in the head of someone who's not doing so well and who's kind of running it out and running and coping with her problems at the same time. It's a lot of self-reflection. We have snippets of the past with a lot of the present. She meets a lot of people along the way, and there are a lot of really important elements in here. It talks about school shootings, it talks about the dangers of being a female, and just a lot of other things. I bawled my eyes out because I could relate to this book on so many different levels. This book is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read in my entire life, which I did not expect when I picked it up, but everybody has been praising this book and it deserves all the praise in the world. I just think not enough of the people on the internet in the book community have read this, so please pick it up. Another book which I feel was very emotional for me as a reader and a book I adore, an author I adore, is Summer Bird Blue by Akemi Dawn Bowman. I have a full review of this on my channel as well. This is a book that took me by surprise. It was my first book by this author and I fell in love with it wholeheartedly, so intensely. I just love this book. This I will cherish forever. This follows a main character named Rumi, and Rumi has always aspired to be a musician. She loves writing music and it's a passion she shared with her sister. The book begins, and this is not a spoiler, and we kind of see a little bit of Rumi and her sister's relationship. They had this game where they would come up with a word and then each of them would say another word that it made them think of. So let's say, I don't know, like plant, and then two other words associated with that, which why can't I come up with words associated with plant? But you get the drift. And so we see them playing this game in the car and they come up with the words Summer Bird Blue, and then get into an accident, and Rumi's sister actually never comes out of it. She actually passes away from the accident, and the entire story is Rumi and her mother grieving the loss of their sister in completely different ways. Her mother actually sends her to Hawaii to live with her aunt because she needs time alone, and so it's Rumi getting over the fact that her sister is gone, and it creates a big void in her life because it's also attached to everything she used to love because it's a hobby they shared. And so Rumi doesn't even have music to escape to because it always reminds her of her sister. It's all the stages of grief, it's anger, it's not understanding why, and it's just kind of her putting herself back together. There's complicated familial ties, obviously, because Rumi has a very hard time understanding why her mother would just kind of ship her off and not be there when Rumi needed her. We also follow Rumi's new relationships with people in Hawaii. Rumi encounters this old man who has a really annoying dog, and at first she kind of hates the man, but they learn to have this kind of quiet relationship where they enjoy moments of silence and music together, and it's just a very wholesome relationship. The old man is kind of lonely and it's them being together. There's also the other neighbor who is close to Rumi, and he becomes a friend. He would like to be a little bit more with Rumi, but in this book Rumi's actually exploring her sexuality. She doesn't really understand, but she's not really attracted to anyone. Rumi, I believe, says she feels like she's asexual, but it's not 100% confirmed. She doesn't want to throw a label on herself, and the exploration of sexual identity in here was one of my favorite parts. All in all, I recommend this book very highly, and I think more people should read it. The last book, I promise, is more of a series, and the first book in the series was hyped, but then the companion novels not as much, and that is the Once Upon a Con series. The first book is Geekerella. Geekerella made the rounds when it came out a few years ago, but The Princess and The Fangirl and the new book, Bookish and the Beast, which just released in 2020, I feel are not talked about as much. These are all fairy tale retellings with a fandom element. Geekerella was Cinderella, The Princess and the Fangirl is a Princess and the Pauper retelling, and Bookish and the Beast is Beauty and the Beast. This follows different characters who are either actors in this Starfield show that is now turned into a movie franchise, or they are people who love the franchise and end up connecting with the author or someone related to the show. It's just, I think the fandom discussions in here are fabulous. It's cute, it's fun, so engaging. I just love this series. I have a full vlog of me reading the last one, which I feel really encompasses my feelings for the series, so I'll link it in the cards and the description. But I just think it's definitely underhyped, and it's for all ages. Like, I'm 23 and I still find a lot of enjoyment in these, so I recommend. I'm sorry if this video was 1,000 minutes long, but I had a lot to share. I hope you guys really enjoyed and could get at least one recommendation out of this. Let me know what genre or what trope you want me to do for it. I want to do like romance books, thrillers, middle grade books, all of those. So let me know what kind of recommendations you're looking for, and I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye guys, happy reading!